Okay, thanks everyone, and welcome to this multi-locational meeting of the Cabinet held at Penalta House and via Microsoft Teams on Wednesday the 17th of September 2025 at 1 p.m. Consider the matters contained in the agenda. Before we go to the agenda, I would like us to recognise the life of Evan David, the former Member of Senedd for Caerphilly and long-standing councillor here in Caerphilly County Borough. Yesterday we saw tributes at the Senedd, and I'd like to thank everybody at the Senedd from all the political parties who gave their heartfelt comments for Heaven's life, and for the last month for everybody who's reached out to Heaven's family and who were there at the funeral, which happened recently. So if we could all stand, for those able to, for a minute. Thank you. Okay, item number 1, to receive apologies for absence. Have there been any?
Just Mark S. Williams, Deputy Leader, he's unable to join us this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Councillor Stenner. If they can be noted, please. Thank you. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudicial interests in respect to any item of business on the agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Are there any declarations of interest at all? Councillor Forehead?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Can I declare a personal interest in item number 6, which is the development of additional learning provisions? I have a family member that attends one of the schools and could potentially attend one of the facilities in the future.
Are we okay with that, Bethan?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
A general question for agenda item 7, just for absolute clarity. A list of schools are listed in the Estyn outcomes. School governors may be on some of the schools that are mentioned. Would we have to declare anything in terms of that? There may be councillors who have been involved in inspections or not?
I don't think so. The situation, the report is covering off Estyn inspections, which are in the public domain already, so the information is already out there, and I think in terms of roles on governing bodies, it noted but not of interest. I don't know, Bethan, if you've got any different views, but feels...
It's just for noting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's fine.
Okay, just wanted to make doubly sure. It was just a vague sort of glimmer that we might have to, but no, that's on the record. Okay then, we'll move on to agenda item 3, that's the minutes of the Cabinet held on the 23rd of July 2025. Pages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You would be prepared to move if they're a true record in second? All in agreement or otherwise? It's unanimous. Agenda item 4, that's the minutes of the multi-locational meeting held on the 30th of July. Again, go through the page 7 and 8. Can somebody move with their true record? Councillor Cook, Councillor Morgan, all in agreement, yeah? Okay, that's fine. Cabinet Forward Work Programme, sorry, agenda item 5. The only thing I think we have to make note of is that the Cabinet for the 15th of October will be postponed till after the by-election at a later date. Any other changes of note? No? Do we vote on this? No or no? Okay, all those prepared? Move and second? Second. All in agreement? Okay. Fine. Okay, we come on to the main item of the agenda. First report as the development of specialist additional learning provision for children with additional learning needs. And Councillor Forehead, you will introduce the report. Ellie?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. I'm introducing this in the absence of Councillor Carol Andrews, who's Cabinet Member for Education. This report outlines proposals to enhance education support for children with additional learning needs across Caerphilly County Borough. In response to increasing demands for specialist provisions, the Council is seeking to establish new specialist resource bases within mainstream schools. These SRBs will cater specifically to pupils with complex needs, including autistic spectrum disorder, and aim to provide high-quality, inclusive education closer to home at Ysgol Gyfun Cymru, Idris Davies, Chris Dafydd, St Helens, and another school yet to be determined. The proposals align with the principles of the School Organisational Codes Act 2018 and reflect the Council's commitment to ensuring that all learners have access to appropriate support within their local communities. This report summarises the outcomes of the recent statutory consultation, outlines the proposed locations and structures of the SRBs, and sets out the final implications and next steps to implementation. I would like Cabinet to support the recommendations of 3.1, which are: consider the information contained in the report, consider the information contained in the consultation report and responses, endorse the recommendations to proceed to statutory notice in relation to the proposal for the development of specialist additional learning provisions for children with additional learning needs in the form of resource bases across the borough. I'd like to move, please.
Thank you, Councillor Forehead. I believe Councillor Leonard, you second.
Happy to second. I have got a question.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Can I ask, please, how can schools ensure that pupils and SRBs feel included in the wider school environment with regards to inclusion, and will the child be included in activities outside of the classroom, and how will this progress be monitored?
We have anecdotal information from our schools that host SRBs already around how they support the young people who are in the SRBs into mainstream settings where appropriate. So it's not the case that the children in the SRB spend all their time in SRBs. They do have the opportunity to integrate for social opportunities and learning opportunities where appropriate, both at primary and secondary. Schools also report that the benefit of having an SRB on site is also, I guess, what you'd call reverse integration. So it allows for opportunities for children in mainstream to be integrating with children with more significant needs.
Councillor Forehead?
Due to the increased diagnosis of neurodiversity, do you feel the proposed SRBs will meet the needs of children with complex ALN in our communities?
Gosh, what a question. You're absolutely right. I mean, there is an increase in identification of ND, both ASD and ADHD and associated needs. What we're proposing now is to meet the needs of those most complex children with ASD in specialist resource-based provision, Also really important to remember that the majority of children with ALN have their needs met in mainstream. So significant amounts of work supporting mainstream schools meet that demand for need of more complex children with ASD, but not the children who have their needs met in SRB. That said, this isn't a plan that will take us into the future forever. We have a statutory responsibility to keep our provision under review, and we will continue to do that, and we may well be back in scrutiny and cabinet asking for permission to consult on further development in the future.
I come in there as well.
Yeah,
The school that's within the report is unnamed. Sarah and I have had meetings with various head teachers this week to see if we could establish that particular school, and we have had a school come forward to confirm. So with permission we'd like to add that to the report today. It's Hengoed Primary School, and then that school has agreed then to have statutory notice. We checked with Welsh Government that we haven't gone off any sort of guidance, that they're happy with that. We named another school on the consultation, and the consultation was given to everybody, so it wasn't just these schools affected. Every single school and parent has been consulted. So Welsh Government are happy for us to add this new school name on, and then just proceed to statutory notice publication subject to approval today.
Okay, brilliant. So George?
What concerns, if any, do you have about the long-term sustainability of the SRBs?
I think there is a concern because it is down to individual schools and governing bodies, and being human, that view can change, and when it changes we are having to work, we have to work with that. There can be many reasons why head teachers and governing bodies want to embrace this, and it's such a positive for schools, and overwhelmingly it's a positive experience for the school and the children. But now and again there can be a different view. As head teachers change, you can have a head teacher coming into a school with a completely different view of the world. So it is something that we're conscious that we have to keep under review. That's why Sarah does so much proactive work with heads, so that we've almost got a little waiting list. We've had a situation recently where a school requested that a base be removed. Fortunately, I think due to a couple of factors, and Sarah's persuasion and cooperation, that situation has now been reversed. But had it remained, we would have been having to look for an alternative site for that. So it's always going to be about the willingness of a governing body to accept that, and therefore it's always something that we have to keep an eye on.
Okay, thanks Nigel. Councillor Morgan.
Thanks, Deputy Leader. Do you feel the proposed funding is sufficient to ensure high quality services?
In terms of the information that's included in this report for your consideration, yes, we've worked really hard to look at what is the capital and the revenue that we require for the provisions that we're asking you for permission to proceed with. We also know that Welsh Government, in the context of implementation of ALN, have continued to provide grants not only to local authorities but to schools. And again, we work together to ensure that we are maximising those grants. It's a challenge because it's not sustainable funding. We don't know that those funding is going to continue from Welsh Government. But we are also looking at what would be the contingency plans if we were in a situation where some of those grants that we use to, for example, support professional learning of staff, and that would be particularly relevant for those in the SRB, was to cease. How else would we manage to continue to develop that opportunity? So it's, it's a much bigger endeavour than just focusing on have we got the immediate resource for the provision, and the answer to that is yes, we do.
Much. Before I bring in Councillor Cook, just a supplementary on that one then. Have we got, is it any indication from Welsh Government about the direction of travel in terms of funding for ALN? I know it's not ideal that we have to assess it going forward, and if grants are available and if they're not. Are there any projections? I know it was considered, probably wrongly, previously that there wouldn't be an additional cost pressure. That's obviously not the case. But is there are there any indicative projections going forward then?
In the last 6 months, Welsh Government have undertaken a consultation about the implementation of ALN, because we're officially now at the end of that 4-year period. All local authorities, parents, schools, health and social care were given the opportunity to contribute to that. The First Minister and her colleagues in Welsh Government have had an opportunity to look at that. They're currently consulting with local authorities again in relation to the information that they've received. Early indications are that there will be a statement released from the First Minister sometime this autumn term with any information about any changes that Welsh Government will make. I don't know what those changes are, obviously I'm not party to that, and they may not be substantial. So, particularly in the context of the time of year that we're in and what's likely to be happening next year. So I think we're being cautious about the messaging that we will receive, but of course we'll have to be responsive to that, whatever that messaging is. If that involves being flexible about the approach that we've taken thus far, or reconsidering how we use the resource, then we'll have to do that.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. A benefit of increasing provision within Caerphilly for our pupils with complex needs, ensuring needs are met closer to home. Can officers please explain the impact of relying on providing out-of-county provision?
I mean, we would never want to rely solely on out-of-county provision or out-of-county provision at all. We would always see that as being the last resort. Firstly, because we would want to seek to support children and young people near their communities and within their families. In terms of the bigger issue around that, if we are in a situation where we do not have the provision in county, whether that's for education or for care purposes, we have to look outside. That is often incredibly costly. And we cannot any longer rely on provisions that we might have used as preferred providers in the past to accept children that we put forward. They have their own entry criteria for provision. They are under pressure and in demand. So our concern is that we end up in situations where we can't even look at provision that's relatively close to where we are. We have to look even further afield and then potentially even look at residential provision for children. It's really important that we focus on continuing to support children when we can.
Councillor Leonard.
Regarding support for staff and children, how will staff be trained to support ALN, and how will this provision support the child's overall well-being?
In terms of staff, we have an ongoing programme of professional learning for staff, whether that's specialist training from inclusion teams or more general support from the school improvement team in terms of developing pedagogy and teaching and learning. We're currently in the process of developing a network for head teachers who host the SRBs. So we're at early stages of discussions with the heads who currently host SRBs. And we'll be looking at how we provide different opportunities to connect them together along with Trinity Fields. We're also then extending that to look at support for teachers and teaching assistants who work in SRB provisions. So of course, it is absolutely within their gift already to link with each other and support each other in terms of good practice. But we're looking at developing a much more robust approach to that. So the current conversation is actually about what is the need for professional learning, what are the indications of the types of areas of need that staff would particularly benefit from, and how do we develop that support. What's really critical is that link with Trinity Fields and making that more robust also. Of course it exists already, and we've got satellite provision in our schools, for example, but we want to develop more well-established networks with protected time to support that staff development. So that's that element of the question. And in terms of well-being for children and young people, obviously well-being is a focus for children and young people across all schools, irrespective of whether they're in mainstream or in specialist resource bases. We'll know about the approach that Welsh Government takes in terms of supporting schools to improve well-being, opportunities for children and young people. Again, we have a comprehensive offer from particularly our educational psychology service and school-based counselling service. And there are particular needs identified for individual children and groups of children. They might need something more bespoke. That will continue.
Okay. Councillor George?
Yeah, what mechanisms are in place to share best practices with the schools?
So in terms of the development I've just mentioned, what we will be doing is identifying across the schools that host SRBs where they themselves are identifying that their practice is good, or where Eston has identified that their practice is good, or improvement have identified that their practice is good. And we will be then focusing on how we can share that practice more broadly. What heads report to us in where they host SRBs is often that, you know, they are focused very much on what they are doing in their own provision, and they are also really keen to focus on what is happening in similar provisions across the county. But where you've got different types of provision that need different types of need, we also want to extend the network that way. So just because staff work in a complex needs resource base doesn't mean that they shouldn't benefit from the expertise in a behaviour base, for example, or the expertise in a speech and language base. So we're looking at how we identify the practice and then create those networks to share that practice and then embed it in the schools.
Our new school improvement model. If you host a base in the authority, you will have an extra visit. So you'll have a day extra from Trinity Fields. And this is new for us. It means that an expert from Trinity Fields will go out to the mainstream school and give some support to the head teacher in monitoring and evaluating the quality of provision in the base, because sometimes heads can be a bit nervous about that if they haven't got direct experience. Our lead for professional learning now will coordinate that work and produce a database, so we'll be able to more easily direct people and be more specific about where that good practice exists. I think it is a balance, because teachers, staff don't want to be out of school, you know, all the time, do they? So it's about how we provide that, and we're looking at innovative ways of doing things like networking and right across the board. But we'll have a more comprehensive range, I think, because, you know, our logo is pursuing excellence together. We know there's excellence everywhere, nowhere more so than in these spaces, but we haven't always kind of captured that and shared it.
Can I ask, how are resources matched to the ALN needs of children? And how are the decisions made about the types and length of support each child receives?
That is all based on identification of their ALN, their additional learning need, and matched to that the identification of the additional learning provision. So that presupposes that a child with additional learning needs that requires additional learning provision has a document called an IDP, which I know you're aware of. And the IDP is that legal document that must outline what is the provision that will be developed to meet that need. We've got colleagues across the local authority, from our statutory team to our advisory teachers to our EPs, who work really closely with schools, because even though we're 4 years in, it's still relatively new to be developing documents that are so complex and so comprehensive. So we work with them to make sure that we understand the need, we've captured that, and moreover we're then identifying what are we expecting to happen for that child as a result, what's the target that we're focusing on, and how will we know if they're making progress, and what is the impact of what we're doing, and what will the outcome be for children or young people. So it's all based on that process as outlined in the
No further questions? I think the strength of the questions, the amount of the questions, gave the report justice. You know, the Cabinet, and I believe the whole Council, are fully committed to the provision of additional learning needs, and I thank officers for their wholehearted support in delivering this. With no further questions, I think we're able to go to the vote now. responses? Just checking. There's 6 cabinet members, yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, that's unanimous, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, we'll now move on to agenda item 7. That's the summary of Estin inspection outcomes under the new Common Inspection Framework, January 2022 to July 2025. And again, it's Councillor Forehead to introduce the report. Lane?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Again, I'm introducing in the absence of Councillor Cameron. This report presents a summary of Estin inspection outcomes for schools across the Caerphilly County Borough between January 2022 and July 2025. It provides insight into the performance of schools under the current inspection framework and highlights areas of strengths and improvements. The findings demonstrate encouraging progress in key areas such as digital competence, Welsh language development and independent learning. The report also outlines the support provided to schools identified as requiring improvement, including those placed in follow-up categories such as significant improvements or special merit measures. This analysis will inform future planning and ensure the Council continues to support schools in delivering high quality, inclusive education for all learners. It is recommended the Cabinet support the recommendations to note the contents of the report and offer views of the overall school outcomes.
Thank you, Elaine. Councillor George, you're seconding the report?
The second report.
Okay. Yeah. Okay then, we'll now move on to questions. Councillor Forehead.
Thank you. What are the key factors contributing to schools that were placed in special measures and how have we supported them to move upwards?
I think schools went into special measures for a lot of reasons, and there can be quite sudden downturns in performance. But it is always about leadership. You will not improve a school, work with school to improve if you don't support the leadership of that school. And there will be reasons why those situations occurred. You have to get to the bottom of those reasons and support the leadership. By leadership I mean not just the staff but the governing bodies. I could tell you anecdotally that where this has happened, it's been about over generosity, sometimes not really being precise about the issues that are causing problems, not interrogating data enough, not being honest about where the school is, maybe not even realising where the school is. That can mean that the governing body hasn't had the information it's needed to make sharp judgments about where to go next, and you can see how it can fall away. What I would say is that as soon as that becomes clear, the solution to that is relatively straightforward, but it can take time, and the bigger the school, the harder it is to turn around. And in that period, parents will lose confidence in the school sometimes. That leads to a financial impact as well, so it can be very tricky. I think it's important to point out that Estin did praise the authority for this part, that when we do identify those schools, the speed of recovery from that situation was good. So if you look at our last situation, which was Risca, that school was in special measures less than 18 months. I think, it's about diagnosis and being very clear about what is the issue in the school. And that's what is one of the strong factors now in the new school improvement team, to really focus on the diagnostic part, because you can waste a lot of time and energy and money dealing with things that are not at the core of the issue, can't you? So.
Just supplementary on that, Kerry. The words critical friend or constructive challenge, I use them quite a lot, because it can seem that what you said there about governing bodies perhaps not being honest enough. There are reduced numbers or reduced sort of intake of people wishing to express, to put themselves forward over the years in their own governing bodies. Has that been a challenge for some schools?
Yeah, I think We haven't seen an issue with LA Governor appointments. We have always been able to make those appointments, but they are the only ones we directly control. There are schools that struggle to recruit parent governors. Other schools are overrun with parents wanting to be governors. It can vary a lot from school to school. I think, again, we've got a new governor support service now that will be far more targeted in terms of making sure those vacancies are filled, because it can really weaken a governing body when there are not just vacancies but poor attendance, turnover. It's important that that's as stable as possible, and it will be a focus for the new service.
It also comes down to the quality of information that is provided to the governing body. So this comes back to Kerry's point about the accuracy of evaluation, understanding, knowing the school well, because the head teacher will present that range of evidence to the governing body so they can appropriately support and challenge in the right way. But if they don't have that evidence, it's very difficult for governors to do their job effectively.
And we do see, a focus on the wrong aspects. The focus should be really strongly in the governing body on the performance and pupil progress. Not all about health and safety or the new wall. It's got to be about learning.
Councillor Leonard?
In 5.10 of the report, the table shows summaries of recommendations for schools. Can you explain how the local authority supports the recommendations with regards to improve the effectiveness of teaching, to provide sufficient challenge, ensure progression, strengthen provision to improve pupils' attitudes to learning and attendance, address any health and safety issues identified during inspection, and to develop cohesive vision for the development in literacy and numeracy? How do you support all those for a school?
First thing I suggest is that any of the recommendations that appear on an Estin report should be, a school should be aware before Estin set foot in the building. So if, coming back to self-evaluation, if a school is successful and effective in its evaluation, Estin should technically be coming in and say, we agree, this is where you are on your school improvement journey, and we can see that you've got plans in place to address them. I suppose the challenges come when a school doesn't see that, and Estin have got an alternate view, and that's when concerns arise over leadership. Every school would be expected to use those recommendations in identifying the next stage of their school development plan. So say you have your Estin inspection in the June, the next SDP, school development plan, that you would do would recognise those recommendations, and then you would be seen to be working on that. Now, there would be an expectation from the governing body to see that that is happening, but also within the school improvement service, the school partner would come into the school, work with the school and identify that that school development plan is appropriate and making reference to whatever the recommendations were. So if it's about teaching, we've now got a system where peers are working across the schools. So a head teacher might be supporting as a school partner in another school, and might be saying, okay, you've identified maths isn't very good, the teacher of maths needs improvement. I've got some really good maths teachers in my school, let's do some joint piece of work to work together. And if that person hasn't got that capacity to support the school they're working with, then they would then have that conversation with a core advisor who would look outwards to see what support is available. So curriculum should be able to be contained within the peer network that we've got. In terms of attendance, we've got, I'm really proud of the support that we offer around attendance in the local authority. We have a process of where officers go into schools and work with the key figures around attendance, evaluating their processes. So that would be point one. But then we'd also look into some of the trickier issues, and then if necessary, bring in some of the experts from the inclusion team. And then the final one around kind of site security, that is something that we are increasingly focused on, because we are aware that we want our premises to be safe and conducive to pupils' learning at the same time. So we are having increased conversations where if any issues around site security arise, they are escalated to us in education, and then we link with our colleagues in health and safety to really kind of address them as quickly as possible.
Thank you. In addition to that, if schools are identified as being in difficulty, then we have special meetings where those recommendations are closely monitored once a month. And we also have professional discussions with all secondary heads in the autumn term, going into the spring term, where we chase down those recommendations as well. It's another opportunity. So there's a layered effect.
Thank you. Questions? Yeah, go on then, Philippa.
How do our inspection reports compare to other authorities regionally and nationally?
Really well. So if you look at the table, you'll see we're above the Welsh average in terms of schools that come out with really good practice identified, and we're thrilled about that because I think historically the emphasis was on getting through inspection and being safe. Now schools are really ambitious around that, and we see some really stunning reports, and you'll have seen them this year. I think when it comes to schools in difficulty, again, we're below the average. At any given point, they expect around 10% to be in follow-up. You can see this table's already up to date, isn't it? Because some of the schools have come out of significant improvement special measures. So we're at an all-time low at the minute.
This is very good.
Or high, depending which way you look at it. We had an incredibly successful year of inspections last year. And we've had a lot of inspections. We've had 51 core inspections over that period. And we've also had a series of interim inspections now. They're like MOT visits with very short notice. Plus we have thematic visits. So there's a lot of ESTIN activity, but the schools are coming through very strongly. And we've got every reason to expect that that continues.
The table in 5.8 is offers that great example, Kerry. Thanks. Anybody else? No? Okay then. Okay, in that case we'll go to the vote. That's okay. Which way do you vote?
I'll vote for you.
Okay. That's a surprise. Okay, all votes are in. It's unanimous. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, yeah. Don't say you voted twice now. Okay, we'll go on to agenda item 8. That's Kevin Brifter, Public Space Protection Order. And introducing this one, Councillor Chris Morgan. Chris?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. This report is looking to seek the agreement of Cabinet to implement a public space protection order to restrict vehicular access along Kevin Brifter for a period of 3 years. The Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014 brought in a new power for local authorities to deal with antisocial behaviour problems in the geographical area by imposing conditions on the use of an area. The aim is to ensure that the law-abiding majority can use and enjoy public spaces safe from antisocial behaviour. The previous PSPO, which expired in 2021, proved effective in reducing flight tipping, and its expiry has coincided with the resurgence of illegal disposal of waste, flight tipping, reinforcing the need for renewed action. This report outlines the rationale for the introduction of a new PSPO restricting vehicular access over the public highway at Kevin Brifter. Prior to the initial PSPO, Caerphilly County Borough Council received over 37 formal complaints regarding flight tipping on the Kevin Brifter area of the Gettiger and Merthyr Common in 2017. Following these complaints and detailed documentary evidence received from a member of the public, the Council, together with the third sector organisations and stakeholders, undertook a multi-agency clean-up day on Kevin Brifter in early November 2017, removing over 10 tonnes of dumped material. Unfortunately, this illegal activity has reoccurred. The proposed reintroduction of the PSPO will restrict unauthorised vehicular access identified as the primary means by which offenders reach the site, thereby reducing the incidence of fly tipping and associated antisocial behaviour. This proposal is consistent with the objectives of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act 2015, particularly the goal of a resilient Wales by promoting the sustainable management and preservation of natural resources. All consultation has taken place with local members, the Commoners Association, Civil Aviation Authority and many other users, all or most of whom support this action. As a result of these consultations, it is proposed that the reintroduction of the PSPO for a 3-year period would be of benefit to residents in the area and help reduce antisocial behaviour and fly tipping on Cefn Brythda. An integrated impact assessment has been undertaken in relation to the proposed PSPO at Cefn Brythda to restrict vehicular access to Cefn Brythda area, Gelligate and Merthyr Common. Officers are present to answer any questions from members. I move the recommendations in 3.1 and 3.2 of the report, and I'll say what they are. 3.1 is the Cabinet agreed to commence the statutory order making process, including formal statutory consultation on a draft public space protection order to restrict vehicular access to the Cefn Brythda area of Gelligate and Merthyr Common. 3.2, to delegate the making of a draft order, the consideration of the outcome of the consultation and the subsequent making of an order to the Executive Director for Housing and Environment in consultation with the relevant Cabinet member. So I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. And I believe Councillor Leonard, you're going to second?
Yeah, happy to second. I've got a question.
That's fine, fire away.
Can I ask what are the financial implications to this local authority for reinstating PSPO in terms of enforcement and equipment?
Thank you, Councillor Leonard. Thank you, Councillor Leonard, for your question. Before I answer your question, if I could, Deputy Leader, I'd just like to introduce Sian Jones to Cabinet. Sian is the Acting Green Space Strategy and Cemeteries Manager. Sian has been in post since the start of September. But before that, was working with the previous post holder on developing and shaping this report that's before Cabinet this afternoon.
Welcome, Sian. Okay.
So between us, we will answer your questions. Yes. So, thank you, Councillor Leonard. So, the financial implications to this order are quite minimal. And should Cabinet be minded to approve the making of the order, the southern barrier will need to be replaced. That is estimated to be no more than £500. Based on experience, there could potentially be an annual cost of around £100 to £150 for replacing locks and keys, because often they get lost or damaged. Other than that, there's just officer time in dealing with any issues or any associated costs with advertising of the notices in the press.
Okay. Councillor George, then Councillor Follett.
Yeah. Has fly tipping increased since the previous order expired?
Thank you, Councillor George. In answer to your question, yes, it has increased over the past 12 months. There's been 6 reports of illegal fly tipping on the common. This tipping is obviously very large in size. It would suggest that it comes from a commercial origin, and then the problem is exacerbated as other people leave their waste there as well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, if you want to come in.
Well, the last time I was up there, I think we visited the common and we visited Merthyr, and Merthyr was a lot worse than us. Is it still the same?
It is, yes, unfortunately.
Okay, Councillor Follett.
Thank you, Deputy Leader, and welcome Sian as well. Will there be any detrimental effects on legitimate users of the common by the implementation of the order?
Thank you, Councillor Forehead. We're aware there may be some legitimate users of the common who could be adversely affected by the order. We've taken reasonable steps to identify such user groups, and officers will continue to work with these residents and user groups to identify and respond to any potential issues over the 3-year period. The purpose of the order is not to stop legitimate use of the common, but to stop the anti-social behaviour, primarily fly tipping and off-road vehicles abusing the landscape of the common.
Okay, Councillor Cook.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. Why were the Civil Aviation Authority consulted?
Thank you, Councillor Cook. There's a civil aviation beacon on the mountain, and obviously that is maintained then by the Civil Aviation Authority. Number of times the actual access area has been blocked by fly tipping, and they're very supportive of this order.
Councillor Leonard. Hang on.
Can I ask, did you communicate with any residents associations, police officers, And if so, what was their response? And also, have you spoken to any individuals that this might have a detrimental effect on?
We've had communications with police, fire service. There was a number of stakeholders involved in the process, what they're outlined in the report. And generally, most people were supportive of the order simply because they understand the issues that are being faced.
Yes? No? I think what you said, Sian, but the PSPOs, whilst some people can be against them, the whole purpose of this is about antisocial behaviour and combating that, and we would soon be criticised if we weren't doing something to combat antisocial behaviour. So I think that was obviously very clear in this. So no further questions from Cabinet then. So are we able to now go to the vote again? Through? Okay, that's unanimous. Thanks both. Thank you. Okay, we now go on to agenda item 9, which is the maintenance works at Full Moon Recycling and Waste Transfer Station. And again, it's Councillor Chris Morgan to introduce the report. Chris?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Seek approval from Cabinet to undertake essential maintenance works at Full Moon Recycling and Waste Transfer Station, funded from the Extended Producer Responsibility Allocated Funding. With approval of the Council's waste strategy, Full Moon Recycling and Waste Transfer Stations will remain an important facility facilitated delivery of the strategy. Full Moon Recycling and Waste Transfer Station is to be retained for the bulking and transfer of residual waste, and costs relating to this facility would need to be funded by the authority. To become apparent, there are urgent repairs required to replace the drainage and concrete hard standing due to the drainage system collapsing. There is also damage to the structures of the building. The estimated cost of the works is £324,000, and the projected time scale for completion of the works is circa 11 weeks. During this time, the site will be unavailable to take receipt of recycling and residual waste from the authority's waste collection service. Therefore, contingency disposal arrangements are required, which come with associated costs of circa £135,367. The household recycling centre, which is located at Full Moon, will be unaffected and will remain open to the public. In July 2025, it was confirmed the amount to be paid to the authority by the Extended Producer Responsibility Programme for 25-26 is £5,399,713. It is proposed that a proportion of this funding from this scheme is used to fund the maintenance works at Full Moon and the associated contingency costs of transporting to Triton Park in Cardiff. This is at the site of our Project Green and the site's Viridor incinerator. Total cost of the construction and contingency arrangements is £459,396. I would like to move the recommendations in 3.1 and 3.2 of the report. 3.1 being Cabinet is asked to approve the proposed maintenance works at Full Moon and associated contingency arrangements utilising funding from Extended Producer Responsibility for Packaging scheme. And 3.2, if approval is given and the contingency costs increase above the included 10%, Cabinet is asked to delegate the decision to the Executive Director of Housing and Environment and the Cabinet Member for Waste, Leisure and Green Spaces to approve any additional costs. I so move.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Morgan. Councillor George, I understand you're going to second?
Yes, I'm second the report, and I got a question.
Of course, yeah.
I know the extra vehicles or extra vehicle journeys going between Caerphilly and the Viridor site in Triton Park, Cardiff. Have we enough vehicles to do the extra work?
Yeah, Clive?
We do require some additional vehicles because of the extra trips, but that is included in the costs and by hiring extra vehicles.
Councillor Leonard?
Can I ask, how old is the Full Moon depot? And are we able to future-proof this? And if so, would it be a vital part of our waste strategy, and is this value for money?
Right?
Short answer to all of the above is yes.
How do we get some more detail?
Yes, to give you a bit more detail, the site predates Caerphilly as a council, but it was only in 2011 that it came into our direct control. In terms of its purpose within the waste strategy, it's still part of an essential part of the waste strategy because it's our only site for waste transfer. And that will continue to be our waste transfer site and also one of our household recycling centres. In terms of value for money, the immediate works sit outside of the waste strategy and not funded, not within the funding package, hence the cost falls on us. As part of the waste strategy and the review of the site by our specialist advisors, RAP, it will be reviewed to make sure it's fit for purpose, and any additional works that are required or amendments, they'll be picked up as part of the waste strategy.
Okay, Councillor Forhead.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Can I just ask a quick question? Will funding previously promised by Welsh Government pay towards this work at full?
It's immediate, the maintenance works, unfortunately not. As I said, it does sit outside of the package that we've been allocated. When it comes to the additional works that have been uncovered that are necessary for the replacement of the barn, there may be opportunities to secure additional Welsh Government funding, but that is an ongoing dialogue that we're having with them.
Councillor Cook.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. Will the facility close completely for these works? The Household Recycling Centre?
Household Recycling Centre will continue to operate. The barns that are used for the waste transfer and recycling, they will be out of operation, but as covered in the report, we're making alternative arrangements to make sure that operation continues.
Just a quick one on that. The hours of operation will be the same as well?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Any further questions? Marcus?
I just wanted to make sure draw members' attention to paragraph 5.1.6 and the fact that this is the first report of works that was identified within the yard with collapsed drainage to be replaced. Where as a result of that, now we've emptied the barns, we've got full access to see what is required there, and there will be a subsequent report coming, as Clive has alluded to, with regards to the barn repairs that we're looking at and costing up at the moment. But initial indications are that one of the barns down there will have to be demolished because of defective steelwork, and the other one is fine, but there will be a requirement to that replacement for the longer-term strategy that Councillor Leonard identified, because this will continue to be operational for residual waste in the long term. So the new facility that we're looking at Dyffryn will deal with recycling, and residual waste will remain at following long term along with the household recycling facility.
Any further questions? No? In that case then, we can go to the vote. Okay, all votes in, and that's been unanimous. Okay? Thank you, okay, final report is the agenda item 10, Whole Authority Revenue Budget Monitoring Report, Q1, and to introduce this report, it's Councillor Shane Cook.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. This report provides Cabinet with an update on the Council's projected Whole Authority Revenue Budget position 2025-26 financial year based on information available at the 30th of 2025 Q1. The purpose of the report is to highlight the forecast year-end position, summarise the key variances against budget, and provide an update on the delivery of the approved savings. For Q1, the Council has projected a net overspend of 2.78 million against the 2025-26 revenue budget. The summary by Directorate is presented in Table 1, with more detailed information set out in Appendix 1. The report also provides commentary on the most material variances against budget and the progress made to date in achieving the required in-year savings. The financial outlook for 2025-26 remains challenging. The council has continued to face rising demand in a number of frontline services, particularly with home-to-school transport and temporary accommodation, alongside inflationary pressures and ongoing market volatility. At the same time, the budget includes an ambitious in-year savings requirement of 5.3 million to be delivered through the transformation programme. Ensuring delivery of these savings while responding to increased service demands is critical to maintain the council's financial resilience. Robust monitoring and timely reporting of the financial position are therefore essential to support effective decision making and early intervention where required. This report sets up the emerging risks of Q1 together with management actions being taken to mitigate pressures and progress towards achieving a balanced budget. I have asked to note the content of the report.
Okay, Councillor Chris Morgan, you are down to second the report.
Yes, happy to second it.
Okay. Councillor Forehead?
Can I just come in with a couple of questions for me, please? First of all, the social services is showing a significant underspend. Isn't there a risk this may change later in the financial year due to demand volatility? That's my first question. And my second question is, what impact will the 3.2 pay awards have? And can we have an update regarding Welsh Government grant teachers pay award as well, please?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so as set out in the report, there is a real risk with the demand in social services, particularly in the children's social care independent sector provision. So the current forecast is based on actual demand in Q1. Since setting the budget, we have had a reduction of 4 placements, and we know that the demand is very volatile and that the placements are high cost. So you're quite right, there is significant risk there, but we're reporting the forecast based on in terms of the 3.2% pay award, so the 0.2% above what we budgeted for, that equates to around 360k. We're just firming those figures up now. But alongside that, they also said that we had to delete spinal point 2. So we're going to have to reconfigure our paying grades for that. So I can't give you a figure for that. So at the moment, we're working on 360. And in terms of teachers' pay award, that's hot off the press today. So they have agreed a 4% uplift. Welsh Government have committed to a grant of 616k for this financial year, which is for the difference between the 3% that we budgeted for and the 4% that they've approved.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any further? Councillor Cook?
Yeah, 2 questions, thanks, Leader. As Cameron Member for Housing, I'm well aware of the homelessness pressures which are being felt across the country, and that's no different for Caerphilly. In relation to 5.3.13, do we lack the required move-on properties? Are we working with our partners to procure more one-bed accommodation?
Nick?
Yeah. Yes, is the kind of answer to that, but it is the highest need, tenure need, one beds across the county borough, and generally from those on the register as well. The local housing market assessment identifies that as the highest need across all delivery within the county borough, and we work with all our developing housing association partners to try and increase the provision of one-bed accommodation in all of their developments. Indeed, we're building one beds ourselves, and we'll see some one beds on the new Oakdale Place development, and indeed additional sheltered older persons provision within T Darren is one bed accommodation as well. But we're working with all partners on the transitional accommodation programme to increase the number of one beds that may be acquired from the market to help those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. We have our landlord partners, our private landlords that we work with to help with some of our temporary accommodation, and in recent months 7 new properties have been brought on stream with one particular landlord on its own. There's 3 more in the pipeline, and we're engaging a new provider with a potential property to come in the next week or so. So there is a huge undersupply, but we're working very hard to try and increase that provision of the mainstream temporary accommodation.
Thank you. My second question is, in relation to our residents who require specialist needs, what impact is this having on our TA costs, and how are we meeting this complex demand?
I'll take that as well, Councillor Cook. It's exacerbated to a degree, really, because those that tend to have that specialist need tend to be the cohort that are actually in need of one-bed accommodation. And the lack of specialist supported accommodation means that because we have a statutory duty to provide interim accommodation until that specialist accommodation is provided, means that the length of stay in temporary accommodation is prolonged, which means the cost obviously increase, and the length of stay in TA is far greater and is increasing in terms of the average length of stay. But there's a number of other areas that we're doing, particularly in the specialist, that I just wanted to highlight on this. There's the transitional supported accommodation, where we just recently had a 6-unit transitional scheme designed for individuals that are stepping down from staffed supported housing into units that only have daily support without overnight support, so the costs therefore reduce, and that takes some of the strain off the cost. We've also got mental health step-down accommodation, another 6-unit scheme actually been developed specifically for those moving from mental health supported accommodation, ensuring they've still got continuity of care, but reducing the reliance on that high cost, higher support environments. We have a STAR model also, which is Starter Transitional Resettlement Flats or Properties, which is an innovative model we've worked with our housing association partners to maintain the property, potentially then convert it into general needs. So they have continuity of stay, but then once it converts to general needs, the cost reduces again. They have that, then it doesn't impact on the kind of the care that they get within there. That STAR model is providing a core component of a wider strategy to meet complex needs whilst managing the costs. We also have kind of some robust cross-sector collaborations where we're looking at dedicated psychology services, specifically on those individuals in TA, specialist drug and alcohol workers that are trained in dual diagnosis. Then we also have an integrated health assessment model working on dedicated GPs, surgeries just for those in TA to try and address those needs and bring them through so they're not reliant on that specialist care, specialist support even, and innovative accommodation models where we have, we're currently progressing a dual diagnosis supported accommodation project, which will probably be live in about 18 months, we think, which has a dedicated space for those individuals with the complex co-occurring needs supported by staff. That integrated model not only improves the outcome for individuals, which is the primary objective obviously, but it reduces the pressure on TA and then reduces the associated costs associated with that TA. I do just want to highlight, just to finish that though, that it's important to note, and I think this is highlighted in the report, that for every temporary accommodation placement, the council has to fund up to 80% of that, because DWP will only fund on average about 20% of the cost for our housing benefit, so that continues to increase that spend for us.
Thanks, Nick. Just one for Leanne, based on the table about our 2.78 million overspend. I would equate to say last year's figures, and where are we sort of generally? We've been underspent before, sometimes considerably, sometimes not by much. Where are we, kind of thing?
Don't have the comparison to last year's quarter one, sorry. I can get it for you afterwards. We were definitely reporting an overspend at quarter one last year because I think we recorded as a unprecedented for this council.
Yeah.
So I think quarter one forecasts, they're early, they're based on a lot of assumptions. We've only got a quarter worth of spend in there, but we are seeing those pressures come through, and I think, you know, just in the recent months after quarter one's closed, we've seen additional pressures as well. So yeah, I mean, it makes us why that transformation programme is so important, and we need to be delivering the savings and efficiencies.
Okay, thanks. Any further questions at all from Cabinet? No formal vote on this, is it? Or do we vote on this? It's been noted in? No? Or do we vote?
No, I would suggest.
Just note the content of the report, which has been noted with questions. Okay, thanks officers, thanks Cabinet for this afternoon. Can I call an end to the meeting, please?